Hey, it's Pete Mundo. Before the podcast starts, could you do us a favor at KCMO? We don't ask you for much outside of supporting our sponsors and advertisers. Could you leave us a 5-star rating and review? Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Helps us a lot. We so appreciate you doing that. Mark's in a little 311 mood here. March 11th, good morning. Great to have you here on a Tuesday on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So the biggest story, the thing that everybody is talking about right now, is the stock market. Now, it's truly amazing to me that the party of Occupy Wall Street has now become the party of, oh my gosh, the markets are down 1% since Trump took office. Oh my gosh, we're all going to die. I want the stock market to do well. I want to see markets go up. 401ks and IRAs and just, investments and things like that. I want to see that happen. I really do. But I'll tell you right now, this is what is happening. And Charlie Gasparino, our buddy at Fox Business Network, put it very well. He wrote this story. It's the headline piece on the New York Post website. Ignore the stock market. Wall Street is dealing with painful detox from government spending addiction. He said Wall Street's puking big time, and the sell buttons are working overtime when the word tariff passes from Donald Trump's lips. If you listen to the fat cat community long enough, you'd think Trump has been in office for 4 years rather than 4 weeks, and that a small trade surcharge on a car from Mexico is leading us to economic Armageddon. Someone said to me last week, they said, oh boy, I hope I'm going to be able to retire soon with all these tariffs and the markets. I said, well, first off, I'm no financial guru. I did happen to study it at Villanova. I'm kind of this weird person that went from finance into radio. Don't ask me why. It's a long story, but actually it's not that long of a story. I realized this was a lot more fun, and I get to hang out with guys like John and Mark all day. So why would I give that up for some stiffs in suits on Wall Street? This is a blast. But I know this much. If you're approaching retirement, you should not be fully invested in the equity markets anyway. You should be planning your exit. You should not be sitting there relying on the stock market. You should have diversification to the point where you're not worried about the ebbs and the flows of the stock market. That's on you, okay? That's not on Trump. That's not on Biden. That is not on anybody else but the man or the woman in the mirror. So we've got a massive issue that has to be fixed. And despite the fact that you hear from less so Sharice Davids on the Kansas side, but Emmanuel Cleaver, I mean, that guy, he is just going bonkers on social media. He's been as loud on social media as I've ever seen him in my going on 8 years here in Kansas City. I mean, he is just, I don't know who's tweeting from his little account there. It's not him. Someone's doing it. But he's all fired up. I hearken back to something that was said yesterday morning. Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, talking about the stock markets while he was on CNBC when he said this.
If we ever went down 20% on the NASDAQ or 15% on the S&P, with people that want Trump to fail, that's going to be splayed across every newspaper in the world. I'm just wondering whether the tolerance for something like that for the administration.
Well, look, as you said, Joe, the market was up 20% last year, 20%
so there is
the year
some
before.
house money.
No. I'm going to put it another way.
Okay.
Did the Biden administration succeed? The American people weren't buying it just because the market was up. They voted out the Democrats.
So I put that very point up on social media yesterday, and I thought that Scott Bessent said it very succinctly, Treasury Secretary. If the stock market was the economy, and the stock market did very well under Joe Biden, largely propped up by government spending that was not real and could not last forever, why did the voter decide, you know what, I'm going to give Republicans back the House in the last couple of years, and then I'm also going to give them the Senate, and I'm going to give them the White House because, well, the stock market's up and these guys in charge are doing such a bang-up job. Oh, you mean it's not that simple? Okay. You mean there's a little more to it than simply just going out there and saying, well, the stock market's up, vote for me. It's funny how that works, isn't it? When you actually think about it beyond just the surface area, the markets are up, vote for me, you realize, well, there's a lot more to the regular economy than the stock market. I'm not an anti-stock market guy, and I guess that's the difference. The people who hated Wall Street, who literally started the Occupy Wall Street movement, are now part of, apparently, the people that care deeply about the stock market and believe that the stock market is the economy. I'm different. I'm not reversing my theory or how I believe. I think the stock market matters. I don't think it's the only thing that matters. And we learned extensively over the last 3-4 years that Main Street and Wall Street are two very different places, and that Wall Street has largely been driven by the 7 Magnificent Seven stocks, as they're dubbed. The Amazons, the Metas, the Nvidias, the Microsofts, those are the big 7 tech stocks that have largely driven the stock market to record highs the last couple of years. That has nothing to do with how, your local car dealer is doing, your local electrician is doing, or your local manufacturer is doing here in Kansas City. It's completely irrelevant for the most part. So understanding that, being able to separate those two things, at least then gets us to the point where we're having an honest conversation on what's going on in the country. Because for too many people, they're not interested in doing that. I mean, I had some goober over there at the NPR station in town say, wait, Donald Trump used to say highest stock market ever when he was in office. Yep. And you know what? When I was doing this show, which started about a year and change into Trump's first term, I would say, don't brag about the stock market. Please don't brag about the stock market. But I also find it fascinating that apparently the people who hate Trump think that because Trump sets the rules on what defines a good economy, we should now use those lines from Trump. I mean, I thought you guys couldn't stand Trump. So which one is it? Do you like to say the things that he says back in his face and act like the markets are the end-all, be-all? Or do we admit that the stock market is a different environment from what is happening with regular America? Because here's what most people, I think, said the last few years. They said, yeah, the markets are doing great. I might have a 401k that's, going up. But you know what I would really like? You know what would be fantastic right about now? Being able to put more money into the markets. Being able to invest more in my retirement, in my future. But I simply can't do that. I don't have the means to do it right now because my cost of living has gone up 20%, and the wages have not largely kept up with that cost of living the last few years. That's where most people have been. Now, if you've been able to be heavily invested, that's great. And you know what? A lot of us have seen, some nice returns, but the returns could be even larger if you were able to put more into that fill-in-the-blank retirement fund. And that's the way to look at this right now. And that's the massive reset that is happening that you're seeing with the markets. You're seeing with the jobs reports last week where, there's an 80,000 job swing from last February to this February in government jobs added. Last February, it was 70,000 government jobs added. This past February, last month, well, we lost 10,000 government jobs. There's a reset going on. And it was not going to last forever. It couldn't last forever. And frankly, the way it's hopefully ending right now is actually going to be as pretty as it possibly can be. It will be less ugly than it would have been had we continued to just drive up the spending and whistle past the graveyard. There doesn't need to be a massive recession here that people are calling for last week and this week. It doesn't need to happen. There can be and will be some turbulence, but it doesn't need to be the level of pain that some people are predicting for the markets and for the economy at large. But it will be bumpy because it had to be bumpy. There was no way for it to not be bumpy. So Charlie Gasparino writes in this piece fantastic article. I will share it on social media. Ignore the stock market. Wall Street dealing with painful detox from government spending addiction. Maybe try and ignore the stock market for a bit, or take some of your gains if you're into it. Either way, if history is any guide, the real economy that most people care about is poised to do just fine given what Trump is planning. And eventually, so will the stock market. Well said, Charlie. Steve Moore is a buddy of ours. He's a former economic advisor under Trump. He will be here next hour, top of the 7 o'clock hour on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app as we kick it off at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning. Coming up, is DEI at the center of a big potential next decision in Kansas City? We'll get you the details coming up on KCMO. So right now, Kansas City leadership is in flux because, well, the city does not know who its city manager is going to be in the future. Brian Platt has been the city manager here for the last few years, and he's currently on paid leave. He was suspended with pay late last week after the city settled with a former employee, Chris Hernandez, over allegations that Platt basically told him to fib to the media. So now Platt, who doesn't have a lot of friends on the city council, got put on paid leave. And the question is now, from what I'm hearing, who blinks first? Does he resign and basically leave Kansas City in shame? Or does he fight this thing and try to stay? Or fight this thing and try to get his own potential settlement, depending on what he knows behind the scenes? That's where things are at right now. And Tony's Kansas City here in town had a pretty good summary of what exactly is going on and what will likely go on in the future. He writes here, Tony'sKansasCity.com, longstanding complaints from a litany of ousted black female KCMO bureaucrats might require de facto reparations from mayor and council. And that would most likely come in the form of an unspoken requirement that the new city manager is a black female, which would be a first for Kansas City. Tony reports here it's kind of like DEI, but silent, unwritten, but completely understood by everyone in Kansas City politics. So that is assuming that Brian Platt is basically done as Kansas City city manager. They would basically hire the replacement in the same way that Joe Biden picked his VP, right? Come on, man. I mean, it was all based on one's race and one's gender. That's what Joe Biden bragged about doing back in 2020. And I'm just going to say it didn't work out too well for him because just picking the best person for the job, great, it might be a black female. It might be an Asian guy. I don't know. It might be somebody in between. I don't have any idea. But picking people for jobs simply based on race and gender is, first off, racist in its very nature, and two, not the meritocracy that we should all be looking to achieve.
I don't think it would be a stretch to assume that perhaps that one person was the particular individual we were speaking of, I suppose.
What do you mean?
I mean, if we have the requirement of what they would be, then it may be a particular individual beyond that, right? We have a targeted person.
I don't know. Yeah.
No, I'm implying that in Kansas City, it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that.
Right? They already know who they want, kind of a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. I have no idea. I'm just reading and going off of Tony's report here.
Sure.
So maybe there is a person behind the scenes that they're looking at and saying, yeah, sure. I mean, that might be the person that we want to replace.
Yeah, just my
Brian
opinion.
Platt.
It wouldn't shock me at all if there's a particular person in mind.
Kimiko Gilmore is right now the interim city manager, and she does check off those boxes. And maybe she's the next one, in which case, good for her. I hope she does a good job. I don't know. But the bigger problem is also this, and this was brought up by Councilwoman Melissa Robinson, who noted this during a meeting in the last few days. The finance director showed the city's paid judgments or settlements in lawsuits are between $9 and $23 million each year under Brian Platt. Now, you might put that at the feet of Platt. But I can tell you from talking to multiple people at City Hall, there is real concern on how easy it is to sue this city and how easily it is to get a settlement from this city. They are getting sued left and right, and they are paying out basically between $10 and $20 million of your taxpayer monies every single year in just settlements and judgments in lawsuits. It's nuts. You've got multiple former employees who have sued the city under Brian Platt's leadership. Now, is that because of Brian Platt, or is that because the city is kind of known to just pay these things and settle these things down? You've got this one employee, Andrea Dortch, who had run the city's Department of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity. Platt basically got her out of the job and insisted the firing was due to Dortch violating the city's residency requirement for employees. She claims that that was merely a pretense to get rid of her because she had insisted that a big construction project in the Northland needed to comply with minimum minority hiring guidelines established by the city for projects receiving big tax breaks. She's currently suing the city. I mean, there was a big piece in the Kansas City Star. This goes back to, last week, talking about some of the pending lawsuits that are out there. Well, the city's paying this out with your money, to be very clear. And guess what? City managers are allowed to make changes in the people that work for the city, right? I mean, if you are hired to be the city manager, are you not allowed to make changes with people who are working under you? I would assume that you are allowed to do that. And you shouldn't be fearful of every person that you might want to move out of a role potentially firing you. But that's the world of government. That's the world of bureaucracy. It's why DOJ actually matters, and why you would love to see that actually happen on a local level as well to some degree, but we all know that ain't going to be the case. But this is why when you look at some of these stories, whether it's what the future holds for Brian Platt, whether it's the interim city manager, Kimiko Gilmore, probably the front runner, says Tony's Kansas City, to replace Brian Platt. From what I can tell, there's something here about this Platt story that doesn't pass the smell test. And I don't know what it is. But this doesn't add up that the guy was just placed on this leave after the settlement last week when they have been dishing out millions of dollars in settlements for years now in Kansas City. Why this moment? And I would say to those who also are in city leadership who might want to move on from Brian Platt, be careful what you wish for. All right? Be careful what you wish for. Because when you know the bodies are buried or where the bodies are buried, you might find yourself in a spot that you don't want to be in. And that could apply to a lot of people at City Hall. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, I am once again happy to do the work of Kansas City newsrooms. But man, I'd love a little bit of love for it. We'll explain next. We're just three guys here sitting doing a radio show in Kansas City, but man, we are doing the work of seemingly 300 in media. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Maybe it's 100. But between myself, John, and Mark, we're getting it done for you guys. And now we've got another example of local media continuing to follow our lead. Doesn't that feel good, fellas, when the local media is following our lead?
It is gracious of you to include me in the group. I mean, Mark certainly busting your butt.
Hey, they don't have to know everything, John. Just take the accolades, man.
Yes, sir. Yes,
take
sir.
the accolades. Same with you, Mark, all right? Take the Mark's never afraid.
Mark's got stories.
Mark's never afraid to take them.
I know the mayor closely watches our social media.
I know. You'll never let that down. He loves Mark's social media feeds on the KCMO Talk Radio X and Facebook accounts. Follow us there. So I bring this up because last night, 10 p.m. news on Fox 4, they run this story on an elderly Prairie Village woman who received a water bill for over $2,000. What?
Talk about a bombshell.
Where did that story come from? Right here on KCMO yesterday morning at 8:30. If you missed it, Carolyn Bond, she is the ex-wife of Kip Bond. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think yesterday I called him the late Kip Bond, and then I realized he's not dead. So Kip Bond is still alive, the former Missouri U.S. Senator. He is 80-something years old, but for some reason, I just figured once you had a bridge named after you, it meant you were dead. But no, he's alive. So Kip Bond is still alive. God bless him. But his ex-wife is Carolyn Bond. She now lives in Prairie Village. And she received a $2,000 water bill. That water bill from Water One is now at $3,300. And she's fighting back. She's saying, I don't owe that money. I couldn't possibly spend that much money on water. It's impossible. We're talking about like half an Olympic swimming pool for an average house in Prairie Village, which I know is worth a lot of money these days, but still not an enormous home by any stretch of the imagination. So to her credit, she's fighting. Now, she's also in her 80s. So this is a stressful situation for somebody in her 80s. Lori Sharp, Prairie Village City Councilwoman, was also here in the studio yesterday to talk about this. And if you missed it, it is up on the podcast on Spotify or Apple. You can find it there. But Fox 4 covered the story last night. They also talked to Carolyn Bond and Lori Sharp, and they did have an update on what they heard or did not hear from Water One.
The water companies still won't budge. We tried to speak with them on camera. They refused. In an email, they claimed they tried to work out a resolution, although Bond's bill is now over $3,000. They also claim for her first high usage month, she was using 4.64 gallons per minute. The second month, she was using 4.69 gallons per minute. The Water One spokeswoman says they provided an over $700 courtesy adjustment. Still not satisfied with her current bill over $3,000, she's enlisted the help of her councilwoman, Lori Sharp.
Companies that are so big and have so much power that instead of showing a kindness and working with the people, they're intimidating, they're bullying, they're turning a deaf ear on people that need help.
Are you tired of dealing with this?
I am.
And that was Carolyn Bond's voice at the end. She looked like she was on the verge of tears. I didn't get that vibe yesterday. She seemed vibrant yesterday. She seemed defiant yesterday. But that also is a fascinating development that I was not aware of when she was in studio yesterday. Water One gave her a $700 courtesy adjustment. Hey, instead of you paying normally a $40 a month water bill, we're going to hit you with a $2,000 bill. Oh, sorry, we might have screwed up, so now it's only $1,300. Is that not the most insulting thing you could possibly get from your water company? Hey, I think you guys screwed up here. My water bill's normally $40. Now it's $2,000. Oh, sorry, we're going to lower it to $1,300 for you. Excuse me? Come again? What?
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
No.
Sounds like the water department's hired the people that used to answer the phone for the cable company when you would call and say, dude, my bill's too high. Well, here's what I can do for you today.
Yes. Oh, that's a great example. Those folks were the absolute worst. I don't deal with them anymore, but you're right about that. You'd call up and they'd have 7 different ways to try to save you, $5 after raising your price by $50, right? Hey, my bill went up $50. We're going to get it down. Okay, I can lower it $5. No, it's still up $45. All right, I'll lower it $8. No, it's still up $42. Same exact thing. Great example. That's exactly what they did. And to her credit, at 80-some-odd years old, even though she can pay it, she admitted, she's like, listen, I'm blessed where I can afford this. It's not the point. Bringing attention to this is the point. Now, yesterday, I reached out to one of the individuals on the Water One board who voted with Carolyn Bond to try to overrule this insane bill. So he's one of the supposed good guys on the Water One board. But he didn't get back to me. And I thought he would because I reached out to him in a friendly manner, and I said, listen, his name is Ulysses Wright. I said, I heard that you were on Carolyn Bond's side here, but your colleagues were not. Could you join my show? He said no. Water One also wouldn't talk on camera to Fox 4 last night. So you've got an operation now, and who knows how many other people this has happened to. She reached out, Carolyn Bond reached out to Councilman Lori Sharp, who reached out to me over the weekend, and I said, yeah, this is an important story. Frankly, I would have run it no matter what. It doesn't matter that she also happens to be the ex-wife of Kip Bond. I've met her before I met him. Hell, I thought he was dead, so what does that say about me? I'm not doing anybody any favors here. The story matters because regular people are getting impacted by this stuff. And now they've got that bill up to $3,300. That is insane. So I'm glad that Fox 4 is covering the story. I hope that others in Kansas City will cover the story because it matters. And some of you reached out to me yesterday and said that you were calling up Water One and that the line was busy. So I don't know if they got a flood of calls about this story yesterday or what happened, but that is nuts. On the text line, Pete, there's no way a 1-inch copper line can flow 700 gallons per minute. Listen, it sounds like you might have a better idea on that than I do. I don't see how it's possible either, but that is absolutely nuts. Pete, this sounds to me like, based on the gallons per minute, she had a shower, kitchen sink, and bathroom faucet running nonstop. Yeah, but she didn't. I mean, she talked to us yesterday about that, and there was no evidence of any kind of a bathroom or toilet or shower running, John.
She showed us a visualization of how much water that would have been. It was like this huge industrial-sized tank like you see out in the park, not like something on a farm.
No.
Way bigger.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just like you see sometimes when you drive around the city. It's like that much water. There's just no way, as the person said, through a 1-inch copper pipe, let alone if you ran everything that other texter said all the time. I don't think it would generate that much.
I don't think you could. I really don't think you could. 913-408-7957. That's our text line and our studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio. Always on 95.7 FM, streaming on the app. Pete, no one is asking why so much water was used per hour. Did a pipe burst during the cold? No, this goes back to last summer. This is back to last July when she was out a couple of weeks for hip surgery, came back and got a water bill for $2,000.
Didn't she say, too, they replaced the meter?
Yes. Yes.
So we had a faulty meter by their own apparent admission. They replaced it.
Yes.
I think that's what frustrates her even more.
Well, they replaced her meter, which basically is them admitting the meter was screwed up. But then what's happening? They're not admitting that the meter was faulty. But they just conveniently happened to replace the meter. As somebody in the legal field noted yesterday to me, they may not want to admit the meter was faulty and drove this incorrect bill because Water One has a lot of meters that are out there that are way older than they should be. And if they admit that this one drove up the water bill, what does it mean for other people around town? Then they've opened themselves up. So it's all about protecting Water One is what it seems like right now. But nobody's talking. They won't talk to us, and they won't talk to Fox 4. And that's a bad sign. We're going to try to get a hold of somebody again today. But at least bringing awareness to the story is the first step to holding some of these people accountable. I'm telling you, Emmanuel Cleaver, the guy has been so active on social media. I did not see this at all during the prior 4 years in office.
Come on, man.
I don't know what happened to him, but he's very active now all of a sudden, John. It's crazy.
Let me give you a James Carville-type medical diagnosis here.
Please.
Now, my medical expertise just extends to whatever I learned from these pharmaceutical ads. But they have one on about Alzheimer's where they say that the people get cranky and get confrontational. They lash out. Yes. So I think we need to add for boomers in this day and age this symptom that you would be going on social media, lashing out. That'd be part of it, wouldn't it?
I think you are very spot on with your medical diagnosis there.
So we need to add that as one of the symptoms.
Yes, I'm down with that, man. That's a great point. So Cleaver's got all these tweets yesterday going after Republicans in Congress, talking about how Congress talking about cutting money out of Medicaid is a sin. Well, you just heard from Steve Moore, and he alluded to the fact that 1/3 of Medicaid payments are for people who are not supposed to be eligible. Now, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, brought this up a couple of weeks ago. He said, listen, Medicaid is for single mothers with 2 small children who are just trying to make it. They are not for 29-year-olds who are sitting on the couch playing video games. He said, we're going to find those young men and we are going to send them back to work. And that's exactly what they should be doing. Right now, about 24% of people living in the U.S. are enrolled in Medicaid. As of October of last year, more than 72 million people across the country had Medicaid coverage. So that's a huge number. And I don't think anybody is looking at this and saying, yep, we're going to cut it from the single mom of two who's got two jobs. No, that's not the purpose here. But we know that there are 7 million able-bodied young men who are out of the workforce. How many of them are on Medicaid? I don't know, but they're out there. And that's the stuff that has to start turning around to, first off, fix the labor market, 2, reduce our spending, and yes, then you can also reduce the deficit in the process. That's how all this stuff works together. But you got Emmanuel Cleaver just sitting there screaming about how cutting Medicaid is a sin. He shared this article yesterday from religionnews.com. So he's leaning into the old pastor shtick here. And it says, headline, on Capitol Hill, faith leaders mark Ash Wednesday. I guess he's a week behind on the news here. Faith leaders mark Ash Wednesday with criticism of Trump and GOP. So that is the article that Emmanuel Cleaver decided he was going to share. An article that's a week old from religionnews.com that is hyper-partisan in nature and leans into the idea that if you're truly on the side of God, you are criticizing Trump and the GOP. Is that right? Is that how it works? I mean, this is par for the course, right? We've seen this time and time again, where if you talk about cutting government services or you talk about the government shrinking its safety net, Jesus wouldn't do this now. Oh, man, you guys always lean into your faith. Jesus would never cut a government program. Now, what's the old expression? You give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I have not seen anybody advocate or lobby for kicking people off of services that they need. But if people are abusing it, guess what? That's got to end. And with Cleaver being so active, I do wonder if we should start some kind of a car wash coupon giveaway here on the show, where we bounce around to various car washes in Kansas City and give out free car washes to people. I don't know. I was thinking about it last night. I got to get some sales folks on the car wash scene in Kansas City and see if we can make that happen, because I think it would be a great time. If you remember the crazy Cleaver tweet from 2 days ago, you win a free car wash this weekend. Let's go. Woo! All right, Stephen Baldwin. What's up, Steve? Got 30 seconds. Let it rip, buddy.
All right, here we go. So I just heard what you were saying about, Elon Musk and Medicare, Medicaid, all those kind of things. And I'm a single dad. And I think when most men say we're single dads, we don't get help from anybody. We don't get nothing. And we're stuck out here on our own just trying to figure it out. And I just heard, something you said, that Speaker Johnson said, this is for the single mom of 2 kids. This is for, and I see this always leaning and geared toward women. And I think that in 2025, women have fought to be equal. They've fought to be held accountable for their own decisions. If they choose to lay down with a man that was, let's just say, not ideal, then, whose fault is it really? You want to be equal, there should be a work requirement. And very few single moms, I'm not saying there aren't plenty out there, because there are, work 2 jobs or whatever. They just don't. And it's time for the same accountability all the way across the board. They fought for it, let them have it.
Now, and you as a single dad, what do you deal with on that front?
Well, I say single dad. I do everything for my kids. I pay child support. I still pay for sporting equipment. I still do all of these things and still have to write a check every month for child support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is not right. That is not okay. That is socialism and the redistribution of wealth at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's untaxable income.
Yeah.
And it is income.
Yeah. Steve, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Listen, it's obviously a topic that's one of passion to a lot of people, and it's something that I don't see getting better in this conversation anytime soon. Sometimes I wish it were parody, but I guess it's good for show content as we roll till 8 o'clock on KCMO. So Dylan Mulvaney of Bud Light fame was on The View yesterday. That's right. Yes. Also,
normalize the bulge. We are normalizing the bulge.
That's right.
Women
That's right.
can have bulges, and that's okay. We're not going to stare at their crotches while they're wearing their little shopping shorts at the mall.
Can you? Let me see. You do your Dylan Mulvaney there, Mark. You like that line at the mall? Is that your favorite line?
At the mall.
You can get high. Well done there, man.
Thank you.
That's a nice job. You break that out at church on Sundays?
My vocal training goes deep there.
Well done. Well done. So that's Dylan Mulvaney of TikTok fame. And then, of course, Dylan Mulvaney helped sink Bud Light as well a couple of years back. And Dylan Mulvaney was on The View yesterday because The View is like, you know what? Let's take an 80-20, 90-10 issue and jump on the 10 side. That's what we're going to do over at The View. So they have Mulvaney on there, and they're doing the whole, like, you know, dude's a victim. And, oh, my gosh, how could you possibly be against guys in girls' sports? And, like, what's wrong with you? Doing all that crazy nonsense. I mean, it was nuts. Literally and figuratively. A lot of nuts going on out there yesterday. And here is Whoopi Goldberg making the case that women should be very accepting of competing against men in their sports.
When you come in and you say, oh, you know, these are men, you know, competing against women, you're assuming that the women are weak and just can't do anything except be here. Have you seen female athletes? They know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what's going on or why this is an issue.
What happened to Whoopi, Mike?
She's a real beauty.
What happened to Whoopi? Like, I don't get being a liberal, but I can at least understand the premise of liking policies that have been traditionally promoted by the Democratic Party. This one, I do not understand and cannot figure out for the life of me. So now the push is women are tough enough to what? Compete against the bulge? What are we making the case for here? Come on, women are tough. They know how to compete against the dudes. Well, science, the party of science should know better that that's actually not the case on average.
It's that silly thing where you think, oh, Serena Williams could take the top-seeded man.
Yeah.
Right? When she herself admits she can beat number 300.
Yeah, she literally cannot beat the 300th ranked male in her prime. They tried. It happened. And she was the first one to admit that, yeah, you know, I couldn't compete with the men. That was Serena Williams back in her heyday when, like, we all at least agreed on the basics of science. And now you've got Whoopi Goldberg making the case like, man, you know, if you just don't want to compete against a dude, what's that say about you? Come on, chicks are tough. Okay, Whoopi, that's now the leg that you want to stand on this topic. That's where you want to take the conversation. Please double down on this. I'm begging you. Please double down. Please keep doing more of this. Please pretend, or not even pretend, show that you have learned absolutely nothing from what happened in November. I mean, that sounds like an absolutely outstanding idea. I am all about it. Sign me up for more of that. It just doesn't make any sense. But it also is fairly predictable from people who have lost their minds. And that's what they have. 913-408-7957. That's our text line and our studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio. Pete, Bud Light had it coming for daring to identify as a beer. Okay, I see what you did there. See what you did there. Oh, that's well done. I can give you that on the text line. Shout out to 7661. Entertaining moment last night on CNN. Obviously, all the conversation around the markets. Let's see what they're doing right now. They just opened up after yesterday's awful day. Dow was off 900 points. S&P was off 150, and the NASDAQ was off 750, which was a 4% dip in the NASDAQ, all your tech stocks. And right now, basically even on the day. Dow's off a couple hundred points, 0.5%. S&P and NASDAQ are more or less flat as well. So not a lot of movement in the early going. But it's amazing how, obviously Joe Biden's in office for 4 years, and there was a lot of government spending done to make the economy look better in the numbers than it actually was. On top of that, and we might forget this, but we shouldn't forget this, that over the last, I guess you would say, quarter of the year, the Biden team spent $250 billion in the final months of his presidency to try to juice things and get Kamala elected. That's through some of the bailouts that were attempted, student loans, things of that nature. It was a total of about $250 billion. Basically tried to buy the election with government monies that we did not have. And now you look at what Trump is doing, and there's a belt tightening going on across all departments. Now, there's this belief that what Trump is doing here is trying to basically make the markets puke and get it all out in the first quarter. Get it all done with here in the first 3 months of the year or so. So it could be messy for a few months. There will be a lot of screaming from Wall Street and also from Democrats. And the market may be pricing in some kind of recession and a pullback. But then what happens? Tax cuts will get extended. Deregulation will kick in. The markets will ideally adjust to trade policy that mostly threatens sanctions and then potentially pulls them when he achieves his goals. That's at least the current thinking of the administration and what they're trying to achieve. So last night, Scott Jennings on CNN is there debating Al Franken. You remember Al Franken? He was, you remember Al? You remember Al? Yeah. Well, then he became a senator from Minnesota. But yeah, he was once upon a time, I guess, a fairly funny guy at one point. I don't, that's before my time. But yes, that's, of course, his claim to fame. Now he's 73, former U.S. senator, and he's debating Scott Jennings on CNN. And here's what their back and forth sounded like between a former Democratic member of the Senate, Al Franken, and conservative commentator Scott Jennings.
Let me ask you a question. You've been around a long time.
Yeah.
Would you judge a presidency based on 1 day or 6 weeks?
6 weeks.
You would judge
you
a whole
gave me a choice. You gave me a choice.
I'm asking. Would you judge a presidency on 1 day in the markets or a 6-week period after having just taken over?
I wouldn't. But if he's someone who said, as soon as I take office, what you're going to see is prices lower and growth, and the economy is going to be great, then you can hold them to the 6 weeks and say, no. That's what's happened is the opposite of what you promised when you're on the campaign trail.
So in 6 months from today, if it looks like we do have an upswing in manufacturing and it looks like the structural changes are benefiting people, will you come back and say, Lord have mercy, it looks like he was right?
I will.
We'll invite both of you for that exact conversation.
Something tells me that is not going to happen. Could be crazy, but something tells me Al Franken's not going to hop on there in a few months and look into the cameras at CNN and say, I was wrong. But I would love to be proven wrong with that Al Franken take. I want to be wrong. I want him to come back on in the summer and be like, I think I might have jumped the gun here a little bit. But something tells me he is not going to be able to do it. But if he does, man, more power to him. I'll totally respect that.